Hey guys, Brian, the bearded nerd here, hanging out with.
Jason from Critical Dice.
So we're here at MaceCon here in Asheville, North Carolina, and we decided to get to know one another and to talk a little bit about D&D and talk about how we got into gaming. So, Jason, how did you get into gaming?
So I think when it comes to D&D and pen and paper RPGs, it really was just seeing a couple of kids in the corner of my middle school gymnasium, like doing something, and it had a kind of a hint of, oh, they probably shouldn't be doing that. I'm going to see what it is because that sounds awesome. And they're rolling dice, but they don't have gambling cards out. They have pieces of paper and they're doing math. And I'm like, okay. And they invite me to play with them. And I would play on and off through middle school and in high school. And then in college, the guy I ended up roommating with, he was a DM and had been for years,
Okay.
and started just playing D&D like a couple of times a week all throughout college. And so just really got into it that way.
So what edition did you start with?
In the gymnasium, it was probably first edition. It was the
Okay.
red box.
Yep.
And then in college, it was second.
Awesome.
Yeah, we
Okay.
played the fool at a second.
No kidding. What did you like about your first experience playing D&D and then going into the college environment?
Well, the first one, it's like when you're a kid and you just play make believe with your friends.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of like Calvin Ball, right? From
Yeah,
Calvin. Like there's
yeah.
not really rules.
Yeah.
You're just making stuff up.
Yep.
It was like that with a little bit of rules.
Okay,
So
okay.
they weren't really big on the structure because who has time to read all the rules?
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of fun. But we're going into second edition and being a little bit older and playing with someone who's experienced, that it brought the structure. It helped explain things and ups the challenge level. And so in second, they had so many great campaign worlds in second.
Yeah,
You got
they did.
Spelljammer
Yeah.
and Forgotten Realms
Yep.
and Ravenloft and Dark Sun. And I love all of those. And my DM made sure I went through all of those.
Okay.
And so we did all the big hits. And it was just great because it literally took us to worlds we'd never imagined.
Do you think that having that experience and exposure to Spelljammer and Forgotten Realms really broadened your D&D kind of lore and knowledge to better help you enjoy the experience a little bit more?
Yeah, because I mean, Ravenloft occupies, narratively speaking, a much different quadrant of fantasy than, say, Dark Sun does.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, Dark Sun is a world that is so old and gone through a cataclysm that it becomes fantasy, even though it probably is post sci-fi kind of,
Yeah.
And then Ravenloft comes from the horror genre, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got all of the greatest horror monsters in
Yeah.
there. You have Mummy and werewolves and all that stuff. But so they're so different. One is it ekes into fantasy from horror, and the other one goes so far ahead it comes back around to medieval and fantasy.
Okay.
And so they're just so different. They all work in the same world somehow, but they're so different. They bring different textures and different ideas to it all, and it just kind of shows you how wide and deep and the breadth of what you can do in a fantasy game like Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, yeah. I see that in D&D specifically. So when I started, I grew up in Miami. I grew up in a very Cuban neighborhood, parents coming from Cuba. So when I started playing D&D, there was a bit of a controversy.
Yeah.
Because culturally, my family didn't understand what Dungeons and Dragons was.
Right.
My dad read The Hobbit and he read Lord of the Rings, but he didn't understand this collaborative storytelling game. And, being in a very kind of culturally diverse neighborhood, the whole satanic panic happened. So, did you ever experience that in your...
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. So I grew up in rural South Carolina.
Yep.
My hometown is 400 people.
Okay.
It's actually just down the road from where we are now. And we grew up in church, and there was a ton of misinformation. Our culture and our church culture just had no place in it for something like Dungeons and Dragons. And what didn't help is that the society at the time, 60 Minutes is running whole specials about how it's evil. and there was that missing kid, and the FBI is pulling Gary Gygax in for questioning.
Yep.
And then they would just drop the theory and realize they were flatly wrong.
Yep.
And there was no retraction, there's no apology.
Yeah.
And so it went on for years, even though what started it all with that missing kid in college, just it never petered out. And so when we played, it was always on the sly.
Yep.
You know, and it was always at school or it was at a friend's house, and we just couldn't
Almost
bring
reclusive.
it in. Oh yeah, exactly.
It was-
We knew we were being subversive in a way.
Yeah.
And so and I even went to a Christian college.
Yeah.
And so we'd play in our dorms, but it's one of those things where you take it out to the student union and play. We probably could have, but we just felt like maybe this isn't the place for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you ever feel like you had to almost hide that aspect of yourself
yeah.
in the regards of playing D&D and playing tabletop?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what happened, is that I would have to hide that part of me. Now, I've never been hesitant to out myself as a nerd. It's pretty obvious. Like, you know, I've been collecting comics since the very early days. You know,
Favorite comic?
Oh gosh,
I know I put you on the spot.
It's okay. The big answer is Spider-Man. The real answer is a Warren Ellis comic called Planetary, which it's on comics. What's it called? The Comixology.
Yes,
You can
Comixology.
get it on Comixology. It's worth it. Trust me. So I didn't hide that I was a nerd.
Yeah.
That was pretty obvious. You can look at me. You're like, I'm going to throw you in a trash can. You know? But the D&D part, yeah, absolutely. And to the point where now people do not care.
No, they don't.
At all. And so I kind of ease into telling people, and when they don't like recoil in terror,
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, people are okay with this now. I'm just now realizing this, you know? And I even had a conversation 6 months ago with my mom,
Okay.
who I was kind of telling her, like, well, yeah, this is what I do. And she's, oh, that's great. And I'm like,
God
I
love
spent
moms.
decades hiding this from you, you know? And she was super supportive. And in fact, she's going to come up tomorrow and have
Oh, that's
breakfast with me
awesome.
and see what I'm doing with Critical Dice.
That's awesome.
You know, love you, Mom. Watch my Instagram for...
Mom, we love you, okay?
Yeah. Listen, hey, guys, call your mom, okay?
Yeah, call your
she
mom.
loves you. She misses you. Just do it.
I actually spoke to my mom on my way here.
Good
Just
man.
the good thing to do, okay, guys?
Yeah. So she's super supportive now and doesn't even think twice about it. And so it just goes with the times.
Yeah.
And I think that the acceptance of it is really largely due to the rise in general of nerd culture becoming popular culture.
Yep.
You know, with Big Bang Theory and Stranger Things and all the Marvel movies. It's just what it's become. And so with 5th edition being so accessible,
Yes.
and things like all the streamers, like, you know,
we have
Critical Role, Acquisitions Incorporated,
Yes. The chain reaction, I believe, which is Matt Colville's.
the new one.
Yeah, his brand new streaming, which, you know, it's such an accepted thing. And it's funny that you bring up like Big Bang Theory and Stranger Things, where Big Bang Theory just had their big
just
D&D
last week, I think,
episode. With Kevin Smith, with Joe Manganiello, which, you know, Joe, I got you, no worries. And they had an all-star cast of people playing D&D. And I feel like years ago, let's just say even 10 years ago, you wouldn't see that. No. I know, like I said, I grew up, you know, in an area in Miami where you had to kind of keep it
on the DL.
Yeah, on the DL. And then moving to Charlotte, there weren't a lot of kids that were playing as well because of we're in the Bible Belt.
Right.
So there was a bit of a wrong assumption in that regard. So what I did instead is I played a lot of quote unquote D&D, aka Lord of the Rings, role playing that I just created with my brother.
Yeah, you're coming at it sideways.
Yeah, exactly. Coming at it from a different angle. And that's where, for me, creating lore, because I mean, let's be honest, Tolkien was and is probably one of the best examples of someone to create lore for a whole, you know, completely different world. And growing up until I went to college, which again, a Christian college as well, people in my dorm room would play 3.5, and that's kind of how I started getting into it again.
Right.
So I started getting into it with 3.5, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. It's definitely different than what I was used to when I played, in the red box with my buddies in our little game room that we had as kids. And it's crazy to think that now those same guys I play with in college, we're playing, 5th edition. We're on Discord. We are, there's so many apps even that are just for D&D.
It's just everywhere, yeah.
So it's crazy to think about that. And like, for me personally, I never thought that I could be doing something like this, talking to other people about D&D. Yes, we're at a con, but it's now so widely accepted, So it kind of goes into the next question of like, so where did Critical Dice come from? Like, where did that idea, come from?
Well, I've been kind of a serial entrepreneur for a lot of my life, and I started looking into selling stuff on Amazon, actually.
Okay.
And so I wanted to do something that was really easy to make. It wasn't very costly. It wasn't going to cost me a ton of money to start a product and then put it up on Amazon.
Yeah.
And so the first thing I did was like, well, you know what? I'll contact a manufacturer and I'll have them make some dice just for me.
Sweet.
And I knew what I wanted to do eventually. That it was just like really simple. They were the first blue true roll dice.
Okay.
And I knew what I really wanted to do was to put a no on the one of a D20, which would become the signature set.
Yep.
I just call them the critical dice.
Yep.
Because their dice are critical to our gameplay, but also these dice, they're critical of you.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, you did not make your save. So I was like, well, I'll just put up as critical dice. And it just kind of snowballed from there. So I put in the true roll dice. I put in the signature set with the no on the one. And then people started selling it. And I was like, well, I should probably have a social media presence. And I had for a month, put up game hooks on Facebook. And no one cared at all. Yeah. They still don't care on Facebook at all. But then my wife was like, hey, why don't you go on Instagram? And I was like, I'll tell you why. Because I'm too old. I don't have a cute cat. I'm not a cute girl. I'm not Asian. Like, this is what's on Instagram.
Yeah.
And she's like, you should do it. And I was like, you're always right, sure. And so I did it, and it exploded. And people just liked the game hooks. These little, simple 1 or 2 sentence ideas that get you going to create an entire campaign or create something that's helpful. So you're not just staring at a blank page going, what am I going to do tonight? How do I make this thing? And it's just
you start not knowing how to plan, and you start to get nervous, and almost you start to say, wow, like what am I doing here?
Yeah. And also too, people they'll get into ruts. They get into like a well-worn groove, and you're no longer surprising or delighting your players. And so this helps shake people out of those things. And so then when people started really jumping on and becoming really just a lovely community on Instagram, I opened my own store and put more things in there. And it's just kind of all gone from that, all because I was like, I wonder if I can make my own dice.
Okay.
Just from that basic question, and it turned into all this.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And with that being said, you have your game hooks. You have all these different, it's very easy to consume. And what I mean by that is, okay, you can take those 1, 2, maybe even 3 sentence game hooks, and you can actually create a really cool session.
Yeah.
How did that spawn into? Did that even spawn into your deck of stories, or did that? How did that come upon?
So the deck of stories is basically the concept behind the game hooks given physical form.
Okay.
Like I've summoned them from the ether, right?
Yeah.
So what it was is that I got this sense that people weren't using the game hooks the way that I had envisioned them to use it, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But I felt like they were missing some utility. They were missing, like, oh, I'll use this for a thing. Like, because I get comments like, oh, I could use this for my D&D campaign. I'm like, that's the point, man. Like, I'm glad you got that on your own, but I'm curious, how did you miss that before? Like, what was I not doing to communicate that well enough?
Oh, okay.
And so I'm like, either I can just teach people over and over, or I can turn these into a deck of cards and show people the way that I feel like these game hooks are so powerful and so useful. especially when we live in a world where we're always busy.
Yeah.
We never have enough time, and then a lot of, especially new DMs, because of all the influx of new players and new DMs, that we over prepare. We try to railroad. We waste all this time when our players go a different direction, and we're like, why? I don't need these 3 pages of notes anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and so I turned them into these deck of cards, 52 cards, 54 cards, with the idea, the kind of next steps idea to go forward with their own path, and then the orc storytelling system to kind of give them a clue as to a 3-part story structure. This card can be used for opening action, this card can be used for rising action, and this card can be used for climatic action.
Okay.
And so that they can just deal themselves 3 cards, and then in 15 minutes with just taking some notes and maybe some monsters or traps from the DMG or the monster manual, they have a whole adventure for that night where they can get 3 hours of fun with a bunch of friends from 15 minutes of work. I think that's a win.
I think so, you know, and actually as someone who has used the deck of stories for one of my adventures, it's actually a video on YouTube that I have where I was able to create a story in less than 15 minutes, create an encounter and have it ready to go, which now has led my players down, I call it the rabbit hole, because now they're pursuing that.
Yeah.
Now they're pursuing what those cards were, which was the statue starts to glow and starts to emanate, you know. That dark tower starts to it magically pops up, and an NPC that you know is not exactly who you think they are.
Right. And you were able to like put that on top of your existing campaign.
Yeah, for
this
sure.
This isn't a one-shot you did. You morphed it right into what you had done for sessions and sessions before.
It's a year-long campaign that I was able to say, and again, the same thing happened. I'm going to admit it. I didn't know where I was going to go.
Right.
Because the way I DM is I say, okay, this is an objective that you have, and then the world is open. So after they completed that objective, I was thinking, well, what next? I got the deck of stories, and I started playing around with it, and I said, well, wait a minute. I can now form this into and for my session, I'm just going to see how it goes.
Yeah.
And quite literally, they took it, they ran with it, and with some improv, it created now that we're in the second arc of our campaign.
Okay.
And we're going, so essentially, so if my players are watching this, just mute it, don't listen, go get a snack. Just exactly. So the NPC that they didn't know was, this person is a vampire lord. And this vampire lord, now his master, that tower is his master's tower, and he's beckoning. He is coming for justice because the party just stopped his master plan.
Right.
So now they have to go and find out what's going on. There was an epic battle that I placed and posted on Instagram of kind of like a wall defense.
Yeah, I thought I saw some of those pictures,
And now they're going into the actual tower, which for those of you who kind of know the old school dungeon diving, multiple level dungeon, this is what it's going to be, but in a tower.
Right.
So now they have these clues where it can tie in where my players are going to say, wait a minute, I noticed that insignia, it's the big bad guy, the big evil guy in my campaign.
Right.
That's his insignia. So now it's going to tie into my campaign so perfectly.
Right.
But just from 3 cards.
Right, and it's given it new life. It's given
is.
it new direction. It's almost made a line of demarcation because you said it's now like this is the second arc.
Yeah.
It kind of bridged from the original to the new thing. And didn't you tell me it took you like 9 minutes to do or something?
It took me 9 minutes. I think it hit the 10-minute marker, but it took me 9 minutes to do this. It was that easy and simple where, I have always tried to tell players or tell DMs, hey, this is what I use. It's simple, it's easy, and it's effective. Because a lot of times we look at our other DMs out there in the world, our Matt Mercers, our Matt Colvilles, Perkins, we look at all these DMs and we're like, how are we going to ever compete with them? They're brilliant. But in reality, you don't need you don't have their experience.
Right.
You have your experience.
Right.
And these cards, these game hooks, these, anything that you use in your tool belt, is for you and your game. As long as you and your players are having fun, that's all that matters.
It really is.
You know? So, and actually leads me to my next question, which gaming culture. Gaming culture today, we talked about how D&D is becoming very mainstream and becoming very much accepted. Where do you see D&D, you know, in the next couple of years? Where do you see, you know, that D&D culture?
Well, I think it's going to become more and more popular. You know, I'm not going to claim to have you know, rolled a nat 20 on my insight check here, but I think that it'll keep growing. It'll keep. They're doing a really good job of keeping the door of D&D open as wide as possible.
Yeah.
And people are flocking into it all the time
Yep.
because I think that they've done a good job with marketing,
Yes.
with promotion. The 5th edition is a very, very easy edition to get into and to start playing right
is.
away. You have tools like D&D Beyond. There's
Yes.
all this stuff out there, and people are playing D&D on Twitch. Like, you can find it
Yeah.
by accident.
Yeah.
You know, it's just everywhere. I think that there will be an eventual bubble that pops, but not like we've seen in the past with other things. Like, you know, there was the housing bubble, and there was
Yeah.
the tech bubble back in the early 2000s and stuff. I think it'll reach a critical mass, and people will just get busy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people who are in college now, they'll get their first jobs and
Yeah.
their first careers, and they'll get married, and they'll have kids, and they'll travel, and it'll go by the wayside. But the core is bigger than it's ever been before.
It
that
is.
people will stick to it.
Yes.
Because now they realize they have this thing that brings people together.
Yes.
At its core, it's a game that requires you to play with other people. So
Yeah.
look at them face to
Yes.
face and deal with problems together. And in a generation where we're dealing with loneliness and anxiety
Yes.
and depression more than ever before,
Yes.
here comes this game that is the answer to a lot of those things, or is an avenue to find companionship, to find
Yes.
friends, to find a creative outlet when your job might be the worst thing in the world, when you're like,
Yeah.
I am not inspired by this job, but I have to eat, you know?
Exactly.
And so I think that even when the bubble bursts, there's going to be a lot more people who stick with it, and the high point will still remain very, very high. And then in the 10 years, those people who played in college, those people who played because they're like 13, 18,
Yeah.
and 20 years old now, they're going to come back.
Yeah.
And they're going to go, I remember this, and there'll be a new edition, or there'll be a new something, or it'll be in
Yeah.
a movie someplace, and they'll go, oh, I love D&D. Oh, you play D&D? I haven't played in years, but let's do it again.
Yeah.
And they'll come back. So I think unless there's just a you know, tragic edition or book or something that just makes everyone mad, I think it's going to continue to grow, and we're going to see a very healthy cycle and some very healthy decisions that people will make because of the joy and the happiness and the camaraderie they've
Yes.
found by playing games like Dungeons and Dragons.
I agree, and especially, you know, GaryCon
Yeah.
is going on right now. And for those at GaryCon, I've never been, but in the spirit of Gary Gygax, this game was created where you need people to play with.
Yeah.
You can play D&D DM in a person. It can be done,
Yeah.
but you still need people.
Yeah.
You still need you still need to foster that camaraderie, that even if you don't know anyone, let's say you don't have anyone to play with, go to your local game store. There's Adventure League. And you're not gonna regret it.
No.
And the cool thing about that is that it's so welcoming.
Yeah.
D&D is a very welcoming game, but also the culture and the environment of us as players, we're very welcoming. We're very much appreciative of everyone's talents.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, too, the culture's growing, because we're really coming out of an age of, you know what, you know, you have your jocks and you have your
Yeah.
this and that, which there's nothing wrong with that, but now everyone's coming together from different, you know, walks of life
Yeah,
to play a
absolutely.
game together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of really the coolest time to be alive in the gaming community, let's be honest.
It really is, because I think those old distinctions from the 80s and 90s are kind of going by the wayside, and people just want to have friends. People want to have
Yeah.
fun. And I think that's the big takeaway from what we were just talking about is you need people.
Yeah.
You
really
always
do.
need people in your life. Life was not meant to go through by yourself.
Exactly.
And so, if this silly game using platonic solids and polyhedral dyes and math is what gets you there, then great, because you need people, and that's just how it goes. So
it's
I'm
true.
glad to be part of it.
It's true. And when I think about D&D and I think about all this, at the end of the day, it's a collaborative storytelling game.
Yeah.
It is a you don't need all the terrain and the minis, and it's awesome to have.
Yes, it is.
But you don't need it. You just need a group of people, some dice, a pencil, and some paper. That's all you need.
Yep.
And with that, though, you can do so much. You can build worlds. You can build stories and adventures. And it's funny. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when playing D&D, you never say, "Oh, I remember when my character did this."
Yeah, I remember when
Yeah. I remember when I did
personalize
this.
it. Yeah.
And that's the only game I've noticed.
Yeah.
That's one of the only games I've noticed. I mean, I used to play WoW,
Mm-hmm.
and I never thought about it.
There's
like
a
that.
barrier there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a barrier that says, "Yeah, I remember we went on a raid, but your paladin did this or your druid did that." It was very much a classification and almost was separate.
Yeah, and I think that everyone has a different relationship to their character. And I know some people who will always speak of their character in the third person.
Mm-hmm.
Very commonly, though, it's I.
True.
But I think that you're caught up in the imagination and the story of it all.
Yeah.
And you want to be part of it. And I mean, people do that with books too. They read books and they imagine themselves in the story or what they would do in that. We all want to be part of something great. That's why you have, like, even for people who watch sports, like they'll watch football and they're yelling at the coach, they're yelling at the players. They can't hear them because it's the TV.
Yeah.
And then Monday morning, they all want to talk about what they should have done because they're placing themselves in the narrative of that contest.
Very true.
And so we all want to be part of something great. And I think that's kind of how that ends up going, and just, living vicariously in the adventure that we just tell with our words and tell with friends.
Yeah, no, very true. Now, kind of going into a bit of more D&D central.
Sure.
Favorite class in 5e?
Bard.
Okay, why the bard?
Versatility. I think it's all about versatility. I was born in the 70s, and MacGyver is my hero. I have all 7 seasons on DVD. I'm showing them to my kids.
Nothing wrong
But
with that.
the people who are clever are the people that I look up to.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I get a chance to see the Bard, I'm like, oh, they can do all this crazy stuff, and they're so diverse.
Yeah.
And I'm always caught on this idea that the one thing they really can't take away from you are your skills.
Yeah.
You can get anti-magic stuff going on. You can do you can lose your magic sword, or they can throw you in prison with none of your equipment. But you always can make a skill check. You always can do perception roll. You always can do acrobatics.
Yeah.
And bards are good at all of it.
Yeah, they are.
And a lot of their spells are just verbal. That's all you need. And so I love the fact that you can really do all of not a lot of flashy stuff, but there's always a way with a bard. There's always something you can do. There's always a way that you can destabilize the field of combat, whether it's social or martial, and tip it to your advantage. And so I love getting to be kind of a Swiss Army character.
Yeah.
And so even when I play a warlock or a wizard or a sorcerer, I'm looking, how can I have the most breadth and range? How can I be that Swiss Army knife?
For sure, yeah.
So that's why Bard.
I'm actually playing a half-elf bard right
There
now.
you go. That's the way to do it. Yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. And I love the half-elf. I love the, right now in the game that my friend Sam is DMing, we are kind of creating this lore with the bard where it's kind of the historical in our world of, hey, a bard had power.
Yeah.
They spoke things and the people listened.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to bring that now into this world to say that, oh, this half-elf bard is, when he says something, it
has weight to it.
Exactly.
It has the force of his charisma, his force of personality.
Exactly.
And so you could be a raconteur and change the world through your words, either normally or magically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, second question. What is your favorite module right now that you would say and recommend for beginners?
Well, I think the starter set is always the great place to start. You know,
Yep.
Quest
Oh,
of
yeah.
Phandelver, it's
Yep.
so good. But if you don't want to go the well-beaten path, I think Dragon Heist is a great way to go.
Okay.
Because, especially for players.
Yeah.
I think that you have to be a little bit more experienced of a DM to run Dragon Heist because you're in a city with all this history, and some of the chapters are kind of vague about what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Like Chapter 2, looking at you, Wizards of the Coast, in Dragon Heist, where I'm like, wait, what's supposed to happen here?
Yeah.
And but it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of like little trinkets to find. They left a lot
True.
of little breadcrumbs for you, and there's the factions and all these side quests, and you could just run around in Waterdeep forever.
Yeah,
And it's
you're
so
right.
much fun. And if you want to go the distance, you want to go like an Olympic athlete to all the way to level 20, you've got Mad Mage right after it that picks
Yes.
up, and they're meant to be companion pieces.
Yes.
So I think Dragon Heist is a great one to start, but Phandelver, of course, is just this is a standard, so well written.
What do you think about the new book that's coming out?
So that's Ghost of Saltmarsh, and it's a lot of the U series from the 80s that was written in the UK. U for underwater because they're very clever at titles, and but it's a lot of these old school modules that were all water based. You know,
Okay.
it's like beachside towns that are attacked by Sanguine and. Sahuagin rather, and or ship battles or under the sea stuff, and so it's all this kind of nautical theme, and it's nice to resurrect some of these old stories, some of them that won awards at the time.
Yeah, they
but
did.
a lot of the audience wasn't even alive to experience them, you know,
Yeah.
and so it's almost like part 2 to the Yawning Portal,
Yes.
where it's a collection of 7 of kind of the greatest nautical themed adventures ever throughout the history of D&D,
Yeah.
and putting them all in one place, recalibrated for the current edition for you to have fun. And I'm going to pick it up for sure.
Which Yawning Portal is a great place to start.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's one of my favorites to run at an Adventure League type of Wednesday or Friday
Yeah.
night where there's just new players, and because it's quest based. It's your typical, here's a quest. This is what you got. I mean, that's not to spoil anything, but
That's the format, yeah.
that's the format. It's and it's I think it's really good to go together. Now, in my opinion, too, I also love Curse of Strahd. If we're talking about, you know, something that just messes with the player and you have to think
Oh, yeah.
what your consequences are going to be if you do this action, even if your character class and your character creation. Like
Yeah.
when I played Curse of Strahd last, I played a dwarf cleric of the Grave Domain. I
Okay.
had never played Curse of Strahd, mind you.
Right.
Never played it. I didn't want to read it. I did not want to even think
Yeah,
or
no
look at it.
spoilers
I
at
didn't.
all,
I
yeah.
didn't want a spoiler. And it was so crazy because back when the Grave Domain was not in the Xanathar's Guide to Everything,
It was just like
it was Unearthed
Unearthed
Arcana
on the website, yeah.
It was so OP. I kid you not. Okay, everyone, I kid you not. First level, you can detect all undead in a mile radius, and you would know their CR rating.
That's yeah.
And-
And paladins can't even do that. Oh my gosh.
No.
Okay, yeah, that's
But then,
too much.
But then when Xanathar's Guide to Everything came, my DM just was like, "You're not doing that," and I was like, "Dang it."
yeah.
This-
Well, also you're in a target-rich environment.
Oh,
being
yeah.
in Ravenloft and
Oh, yeah.
Barovia. So yeah, no, I think the Ravenloft whole series, even from second edition to Curse of Strahd now in fifth, is such a wonderful campaign to play in, and that Curse of Strahd is probably one of the strongest modules they've come
Mm-hmm.
out with in fifth edition. But I would never. I mean, I know it's not the real conversation, but I would never start new players there.
No,
because
I wouldn't
It's such
either.
a particular
Yeah.
flavor
Yeah.
that you got to see what it is, just kind of normal, to see how it is when it's really just something phenomenal.
It's a really good module to run if, let's say, you as a DM are kind of burnt out.
Yeah.
And your player wants to run something. You all know how to play.
Yeah.
You all know kind of what you're getting into.
Right.
You can run it. I think it's levels 1 through 10. And if you want, even afterward, if you all survive, you can continue that
Right.
that story.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not a beginner level
Right.
module or
Yeah.
anything.
Even
like
though
that.
it starts at level 1,
Yeah,
maybe
it's-
not for level 1
Ex-
people,
yeah.
but level 1 characters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You might want to do that tier 2 players,
Yeah.
you know. But really, one of my last questions: what can we expect from Critical Dice? Is there anything that you want to hint to us, hint to the fans and the audience? Is there anything we should keep an eye out for? Because I know you have the Endless Bag of Dice.
Yeah, so
and that is something where maybe that's been recent.
yeah, so the Endless Bag of Dice is basically a dice subscription service where you get a brand new set of dice to your door every single month, and it's $6.99, and it's dirt cheap. Hundreds of people have jumped in and been part of the Endless Bag, and honestly, now if anything cool or new is going to come out from Critical Dice as far as products go, it's going to be in the Endless Bag.
Yeah.
And then maybe months later, you might see it in the store, have an opportunity to get it. But those people who are in the Endless Bag of Dice, they're in the inner circle. They are part of everything that's exciting and cool, and all the experiments that I'm trying, and like, well, what about this? You get to be a part of that. And so the Endless Bag of Dice really has become like a group inside a group, and almost like a testing ground, and where there's some really awesome things. And I get messages all the time where people are like, oh my gosh, this. And the bag for March just went out the other day.
Oh, nice.
And people are already starting to post what it was, and there's a sufficient amount of squee that goes with it. So there's that, and I do have something kind of cool coming up for March.
Okay.
It'll just be on the Instagram. It's if you like baseball, sports, basketball. If you like basketball in March, that's kind of what we're thinking about.
So keep your eye out, y'all, on that. Keep an eye out on his Instagram. Go follow him. If you're not following him already, please do so, because again, I've been able to learn and grab so many things from just the game hooks that, in my opinion, just having that out there for free is something that I and my channel try to show and say, hey, listen, I'll tell you right now, got to pay the bills, we understand, and everything like that. But when you have things that are going to help your hobby and it's free, that's awesome.
Yeah, and the game hooks will always be free, because the whole reason that Critical Dice does what it does, that I do what I do, is because I want people to have more fun around their gaming table. Yeah. And so having ideas out there for free, it helps you have more fun. Offering great dice helps you have more fun. Deck of Stories, it helps you have more fun. I want you to have fun. I want you to connect with people, and I want you to find something that you truly brings you joy.
Well, that's all the time we have, folks. Jason, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me and just talking. Guys, like I said, please, please, please go follow Jason. Follow Facebook, Instagram, and really just see what he's doing out there. He's got a lot of great stuff. But at the end of the day, remember, this is about having fun. So, again, Brian the Bearded Nerd.
Jason at Critical Dice and at thecriticaldice.com.
Everyone, keep gaming.